one big part is it's so much more accessible to create content these days. 15 years ago, it was much harder to even do something like upload a video or add captions, but there are more and more tools that are making it easier and easier. And as a result, content producers need to continue to step up their game in terms of the quality of their content.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, I am really excited about the guests we have on today for a multitude of different reasons. And one being really talking about quality and what artificial intelligence can do to your content creation and content optimization. Because when you start looking at your differentiator, if you're focused in on quality and building relationships, it is vital. Things have changed over the past couple of years, and more so within the past 12 months when you start talking about COVID and then going to the rest of 2021, and dare to say it's not changing, it's not going back, and hopefully we'll get some more insights on that. But I have Ryo Chiba on the show with me today. And so Ryo, before you get the opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself, if you could answer one important question to me, what should B2B digital marketers be asking themselves right now?
So in terms of what B2B digital marketers should be asking themselves, one critical question is, would I read my own content? And it seems like a easy question, something that you'd be able to answer in a second, of course, or yes or no. But really, I think people don't ask this question to themselves enough. And it's because as digital marketers, we spend so much time investing in the processes and the people behind creating this content. We get emotionally attached to it. Our ego is tied to it. But in the end, as an objective third party, you need to be really thinking about, is this something that I would actually read? And oftentimes, introspecting on that, you might realize that there are things about your process that you need to improve, that you wouldn't read this content that you're actually producing. So that's what I would answer to that question.
I think that's awesome. We're going to get deeper into that in a minute. And so if you could, give us a little bit of understanding on, your role, your organization, and your experience related to this particular product and solution, and really overall aspect of ranking higher in the search engines today.
Yeah, so in terms of my background as a digital marketer, my experience starts back in 2012. I was still in college and I was starting a new company with some other undergrads. It was in the B2C space. It was sort of similar to Pinterest. But we were growing that startup. Eventually we pivoted to turn our solution into a B2B product. And I basically self-taught myself all about SEO and content marketing. And we were able to grow that product to about 40 people and 5 million in revenue, and all through our content program and our SEO efforts. And so I'm a developer turned marketer. And through that experience, I learned about how hard it is to scale up content and do it right. Even for highly technical, highly skilled people to do this, it's quite challenging. And when content is becoming more and more competitive, it just makes it, even harder to get the results that you want from a marketing perspective. And so after we sold that company in 2018, I decided that for my next venture, we'd be really honing in on this problem, helping B2B marketers scale up their content and do it in a way that isn't necessarily super technical, is still accessible, and results in higher quality content being produced.
Well, and as you're talking about that, I want people to kind of stop and think about this whole maturation process and how we've gotten here today. We all know that really the proliferation of digital devices has made a significant impact, on the way that we access information, the way that we actually use information throughout our lives, and how we connect with other people. And that has greatly affected the content, that is currently, on the web. So I have talked to a lot of my friends who have been creating content, and they've been content creators for, 15 years. And they're saying, my stuff doesn't get shared like it used to. Why is that?
One big part is it's so much more accessible to create content these days. 15 years ago, it was much harder to even do something like upload a video or add captions, but there are more and more tools that are making it easier and easier. And as a result, content producers need to continue to step up their game in terms of the quality of their content. And I think another aspect to that too is the methods by which content is found, something as simple as Google's search engine, are becoming more and more sophisticated also. So it's not enough to just produce a generic piece of content that is good enough. Google, can find the specific paragraph in your content that would be relevant for a specific search. And so if your content isn't highly relevant to the audience that you're targeting, that can make a huge difference as well. And so those are some aspects that marketers need to be understanding when they're getting into the game, because if they don't have it, if their content isn't on point in those dimensions, then it's not going to succeed.
And as you talk about that, so why do we go and create this content from a marketing perspective? It's ultimately to drive some type of either brand awareness or sales activity. And what has happened in a very short period of time, it's been slowly happening, and it was forced, COVID forced it, is that we now need to start bringing all these things together: marketing, sales, and even, dare to say, client success and customer retention. All of those three pieces now need to come together. And the same is happening with content creation from a technical perspective, from a copy, perspective, from an information perspective. Talk a little bit to that.
Yeah. And I think that question, or this part of the discussion, really ties into the question of, what is a B2B digital marketer in the end? How I see it is marketers are educators, they're teachers. And that applies in both internally and externally, both to your own team, internally among different departments like sales and engineering and how they tie into marketing, and also to your persona and your audience, teaching them about the problems that they're having, that there are solutions out there. And great B2B digital marketers are able to bridge that gap and not only present information that's relevant to their students, in this case the customer, but also meet them where they're at. So figuring out where they exist, whether it's in a specific Slack group or targeting them effectively through ads.
Now, as you say that, I start getting this picture of turning over content creation to somebody who is entry level, low skill, doesn't have much exposure or experience to the industry or the product or the service, and then asking them to create content. So here's the question: should we be giving content creation to somebody who has a higher skill level?
In terms of figuring out whether to give the work of creating content to an expert, if you can afford it, certainly. A lot of teams don't have those resources, so they're forced to make choices in terms of handing this work over to less skilled teammates. And I think in this case, it's a matter of what's the most efficient for the business. But I would say that even for experts, it can be challenging to create relevant content, because as anybody who sat through a boring presentation knows, the expert doesn't necessarily know what you want to figure out as a beginner or a novice. And many of the customers that are looking for B2B solutions don't know everything that an expert would, and don't even really care about that expert level. They just want to figure out the solution to their problem. And so, a good story that I can tell is one of our customers specializes in giving recommendations for expert level sporting equipment, things like snowshoes and skis and that kind of thing. And they've recruited a team of athletes and experts in all these areas to create content around the best hiking shoes and the best sporting equipment. And they've found that, initially the guides that they're producing had so many technical details or aspects to these products that are completely irrelevant to most people who are getting into these sports. And so, our software helped them identify, okay, here are the real questions people are asking around these products, and how can we take the expert level knowledge and apply it to that problem. And so that resulted in a much higher engagement rate, both in terms of the content, but also the product that they're selling.
Okay, so you bring up a really interesting point. does a company have to do a much better job of determining and figuring out who their ideal customer is today versus it's been in the past?
Absolutely. In terms of content relevance, like we talked about earlier, not only is it important for the actual the engagement or the engagingness level of the content, it's also important for search at a technical level. Google is constantly evaluating what parts of the content are relevant to the audience. And so if it's not necessarily relevant, then it's not going to be showing up in the channels that you want them to.
Well, and we're talking about Google, and because it's really the major and biggest search engine by far that's out there. And they talk about 200 plus ranking factors when you look at content and trying to, rank and have content, really have the impact to pull that marketing and sales together. Now, does a tool like yours actually look through all 200 ranking factors for Google?
In terms of the ranking factors, the interesting thing is that most people who are just starting with SEO or maybe have intermediate level of experience put in a lot of weight into which ranking factors make the biggest difference, and how can I game the system so I can rank number one. But in the end, when people say quality content wins, what that really means is that Google relies much more now on engagement factors that are determined by user behavior, things like time on site and bounce rate. And these are metrics that, although are objective and are numerical, rely on human behavior, and that human behavior relies on the subjective factors, which people refer to as quality. But in the end are things like, does this site seem authoritative and trustworthy? Does this site have an interface that I can easily get to the information I want? Is it entertaining? And does it have videos that I can watch? And so all of those factors play a huge role in terms of the rank of a piece of content. And I think those are really the things that people need to be paying attention to. And in terms of whether our software takes a look at all those ranking factors, our software really focuses in on producing content that's relevant to the audience so that audience can stay on the page longer, stay engaged, and get value out of that content, and as a side effect, result in a higher ranking, because Google sees that people are actually staying on that page and getting value out of it.
Now, Google has also made some changes here recently in regards to, mobile indexing and mobile first, and they made one significant update. They're getting ready to make another. And so they talk about, a lot of changes happening with Google. So two things, how do you keep up with those changes that Google makes so that your tool is essentially serving customers the best? How's that one question? And the next is, how is mobile going to affect, what we do going forward in regards to search indexing and optimization?
So to answer the first question, which was how do we keep on top of all the changes that Google's constantly making to their algorithm, we're in a privileged position to be working with some of the top content teams that are putting together, high level content or high quality content that is actually meant to serve the search audience, rather than teams who are specifically focused on extracting as much traffic as possible and trying to game the system. And there's obviously a gradient of marketers who sort of fit in between that, between people who move really fast and are focused on the results, and then people who are focused more so on, the higher level intent of creating content quality. And then by taking a look at our customers, we can see how those algorithm changes are making an impact and evaluate, are those things relevant for our product and the recommendations we make to our customers. And I can say that over the past year, for those customers who have focused more so on the subjective aspect of adding value to their customers, those algorithm changes have affected them less than those who are focused more on can we pump out as much content as possible and try to game the system. Those are the kinds of situations where Google is constantly finding unique ways to identify that kind of behavior. And so in terms of keeping up, I think if you're listening to the show and you're in the position to create content, my recommendation is, as long as you focus on the end result of educating your customers the algorithm changes shouldn't affect you as much. And so for the second question, I know that you asked about mobile and how that's changing the game. One of the biggest things that I think mobile unlocks is a whole slew of new types of searches that wouldn't have been done before and in great volumes. When you're out and about during your day, you can just pull out your phone and do a search where previously you wouldn't have been able to. And those kinds of searches are unique and create new intents or goals that users have. And as a result, that's going to change the content that marketers need to be creating. And I think a good example of that is, with that sporting goods customer, if a customer is in a retail store and they want to look up certain aspects of a specific product, those kinds of searches wouldn't have been made in the past because a user wouldn't be able to search for that. But now they're doing that, and as content producers, we need to be ready to serve the right information for that kind of request.
Okay, so to kind of clarify that point, there's a couple things here when you start talking about search. There's the local and what's near me and all of those things. And then there's other things that may be associated with B2B, whether like, hey, I'm a SaaS-based business, and there isn't necessarily a location driver that's associated here. So those search factors and parameters and intents and all of those things can be quite unique to the different organizations. So how do you help people to understand, that the content you're creating, is going to be relevant based on those different parameters?
Yeah. So in terms of how we figure out whether that content's going to be relevant, are you asking in terms of our product or also just in general?
I'd love to learn both.
Yeah. So in terms of our product, how we establish whether your content is going to be relevant is that we analyze the existing top results in Google. Luckily, Google's done all the hard work of assessing all of the content that's out there and figured out which pieces of content are engaging users and keeping them on the site. And so analyzing those top results are a real window into the kinds of things that the search audience wants to learn more about. And typically that kind of research is done manually, but we help you do that automatically and sort of speed up that process.
Or just not done.
Yeah.
That's what I've been saying often. We
exactly.
know, and we'll just go ahead and do it. Okay, so I love this insight that you're sharing because it's so deep and so rich. And you were talking about being in school in 2012. Goodness, I was back in school in 1991. So my goodness, your wealth of insight is man, it's humbling. And so from that perspective, I like to ask people, what their thoughts are on the industry that we're in, and specifically for me, the niche of B2B. So, in your mind, in your perspective, what is B2B digital marketing?
In terms of what B2B digital marketing is, I would say it's all about teaching your customer, teaching your employees, teaching all of your prospective customers about the problems and solutions that they're going after. And I think everybody has had a great teacher and can relate to somebody who has inspired them or helped them get to the next level. And for B2B, some of the problems that we're solving are very specific, either industry or the problem itself is very niche. So that a lot of the education is about, the problem itself, and how it arises, who it affects. A great teacher knows who their students are and where to meet them in terms of their level. If you're too complicated in your explanations, then people are going to get confused and not understand. And so I think that's what I think of when I ask myself the question, what is a B2B digital marketer?
And thanks for that, because everybody's perspective is unique to them and their ecosystem and their experiences. And even when you start asking people who are in an operation or a company who is doing the work, they're going to have a different definition because of their purview and the way that they think about it and their responsibilities. So if you started talking about, things that have changed so much. We now have things that we've been doing that are common practice, and that maybe we even say that, hey, you should be doing this, that have become overrated and overstated and too common. Is there something that stands out in your mind that we should really reconsider?
I think one key thing to reconsider is the way in which people assess their own progress as marketers in terms of the size of teams they manage. One thing that I've learned as an entrepreneur is how important it is to stay lean, because big teams just inherently are slower and more complicated and difficult to manage, and it creates an exponential amount of work to get the same amount done. So I think, for me, I think big teams are overrated. The best leaders have their own cadre of people that they know how to communicate with and can get stuff done. More specifically, from a content side, I think that one thing that a lot of people are talking about is the idea that AI is going to be able to generate content for me. I can just click a button and get great content, and that solves all my problems. But really, that's a race to the bottom. That kind of capability is coming out, sure, in the next couple of years. But really, if you want to drive results, it's going to continue to be about knowing your customer better than your competitors, speaking to them in their language, and solving the problem better. And that's not going to come from an AI that can generate content, although that can maybe help in the process. But I think that in general is a overhyped thing that's coming.
Okay, so I think the question is that you're alluding to is artificial intelligence going to eliminate the need for content creators?
So in terms of whether artificial intelligence is going to eliminate content creators, I think that it's going to change their job description in the same way that, computer used to be a job title for people who did math problems, but a content creator might have been somebody who used to have to, type in every single word for the piece of content that they wanted to create. But as time goes on and AI gets more sophisticated, content creators are going to be take a more editorial role and work at the level of concepts and ideas and things that they want to explain. And the machine will then be able to translate that into their language and in their tone of voice. And so it's certainly going to make a slow but steady impact in terms of how people do work. But in the end, there is still so much creative and critical thinking involved in producing a compelling piece of content that I don't think that part of the equation is going to change in the near future.
And that's the same thing that, by the way, is occurring, in the customer service world. So there is a lot of chatbots and AI that is being used in the customer service and customer care, industries. And some people will come right out and talk about that issue of replacement of people. But what most people say is really what you were saying, is that it's more of an augmentation. It's a scenario where, I can now take, the humanity, of somebody who is in customer care or creating content, and now allow them to do what they do best faster and more effectively.
Absolutely. And, there's just that human element, especially for customer experience. The human element can't be replaced. At least personally, whenever I'm on a chatbot, I'm always trying to press 0 to get to a real person. But
okay, so that brings up a good point. So I've done a couple of research studies and wrote papers on artificial intelligence and use of artificial intelligence in customer service and customer experience and contact centers. And there's really what I called 3 different generations of artificial intelligence capabilities. And really, when you start talking about a first generation, it's almost rules based. It's very, very simple. I mean, it's if somebody says this, therefore I give that, right? And that's really what most of the chatbots that are out there are. I mean, they're very simple rules based. You have to tell it exactly how to respond based on what's asked. And then you have something that goes into a little bit of a more generation 2, where I can now start accessing, database and information, and but I'm still only dealing with one intent, right? And you have to get into a generation 3 bot where you can now ask multi-intent. And let me explain that a little bit for those who haven't had exposure to that. So multi-intent is that I'm asking a chatbot to respond and provide support on this and this. That's multi-intent. So in other words, I would like to register, get a flight, to Chicago on Tuesday, May 2nd. And I also need a refund for my last flight to Orlando. Chatbot can't do that. I mean, very, very few can do that. You need a Gen 3 bot to do that. So if I'm thinking about content creation in that context of Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, where do you think we are at the moment, and where would your solution lie?
I think currently we're in the second generation where it is more sophisticated than a simple rules-based approach. I think we're barely maybe at the cusp of going to the third generation. But in the end, the most sophisticated systems out there, how they work is they essentially are looking word by word, and they're trying to predict the probability of the next word. And that kind of system just happens to be really good at generating human sounding text. However, in the end, the system has no understanding of the logic behind the communication. It has no real concept of what's going on. It's just a machine that's trying to figure out the probability of the next word. And so in that sense, I would say it's still far from the third, generation. But in terms of our product, I wouldn't say it necessarily is in the business of generating text. I would say that it's utilizing that AI to help you get closer to the humans on the other side of your content, which is the search. And so by utilizing that real-time search behavior and then using AI to cleverly assemble that into something that's very quickly and easy to utilize by a marketer who's busy and has got a million other things on their plate, that's how we fit in using our AI.
Hence the augmentation stance. So also when you're explaining that, it sounds to me like even though we're talking about content creation and content optimization, it seems like your tool allows me to be a little bit more, instead of putting so much effort and emphasis into the whole creation and origination piece, more into the editing and the finesse piece.
Definitely. In terms of the effort that you spend, every minute that you spend trying to write a specific sentence is something that you could be putting towards the more creative and critical aspect of evaluating, is this idea relevant for my audience? And it's something that people don't consider enough and put enough time into when they are creating content. Like you mentioned, if it's too much research, usually it doesn't get done at all. And so that's a huge problem.
Well, and here's the interesting part and the irony about that is that when you look at the most shared content and the most engaging content, especially in B2B, it has data in it. So if I'm not doing the data component, I'm automatically and inherently causing myself to have less of those signals go back to the search engine saying that this is engaging content.
Definitely. And I think that's also where that is also something that ties into, one thing that's really important, I think, for B2B digital marketers to focus on is build a moat and work on things that are able to compound over time. And data and content is one of those things. It's something that somebody else can't quickly replicate or pull. It's something that's unique to your business and adds up over time. And so that, just to echo your point, I think that is really important.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So now a lot of us, already have budgets that we're working with. And it doesn't matter if you're that team of one, right? And you're having to do all these things, or you are, part of a larger team. We are currently have, spend that's happening and we're looking for returns on investment. And if you were to say and give advice to a B2B digital marketer, what would you tell them in regard to reallocating of some of that budget? You probably should take away from here and move it to over here. What is your answer?
In terms of reallocating budget, it would be to building that moat and figuring out what is it that's going to stand the test of time, because it's so easy in marketing to spend, especially on things that don't build that moat, especially, on things like paid, although it gives you that quick boost. It's something that, if you turn off one day, it's not going to be there unless you continue to pay for it. And so, those are things like being able to build relationships with your customers that you can lean on to produce marketing assets, or, SEO and content. That's not something that just goes away. Authority is built over time. And so for marketers who are looking to enhance their budgets, it would be to find opportunities to take the spend that's going to non-compounding activities and putting it into compounding activities.
That's very helpful. Now, needless to say, and I mentioned my experience and background in AI and customer experience and contact centers and how, that's having such a massive impact. That also brings a lot of solution providers. When I start looking at the funding that has been given to a lot of solution providers in that space in a basically a 3-year window, it is massive. And the same thing is happening, here as well. I mean, you're part of that with creating, your company and your solution and getting the funding. But there's a lot of competition out there, and it's going to continue to grow. So that means we have to be more savvy if we're looking for this type of solution for ourselves and for our organization. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, and maybe you can even weave in some of that different generation piece, right? We talk about first, second, and third, and talk about some of these competitors that, we may come across if we do searches for, AI content optimization or AI content creation. And that is, we got MarketMuse, Brainwork, ClearScope, Phrase, Surfer SEO, AI Writer. There's a ton, and you may have a few more that you can add to that. But there's a lot of different competitors out there. How does Topic, your organization, your company, differentiate from the rest of those?
Yeah, in terms of the differentiators, I guess I can start in terms of describing the market overall and where different customers fit in, because every industry or every solutions landscape has, that kind of map that you don't really see until you're living in it. And as customers, you might never ever see it because it's like so complicated sometimes. But in terms of our map in the content optimization space, I would say I'll start from the bottom to the top, bottom being, in terms of budget. So in terms of the lowest budget competitors out there, those are the ones like Phrase or Surfer or AI writing tool. And they really focus in on targeting customers in that bucket who want a one-click solution. People who are looking to write content quick and just using one button, and not spend so much time into curating something that's going to be high quality. And so the reason why those tools are priced at that point is because for them it makes sense, because most of these people have low budgets, but there are a lot of them. There are people who are either just starting in marketing or maybe don't have a marketing background but know they have to do it, and that is sort of a bucket of tools out there. On the other side of the space, when you're going, as you're moving up market, you start to see tools like ourselves, and ClearScope is another one that really are more targeting those teams who are focused in on the relevance of their content, who have either in-house teams or maybe they're an agency that caters to brands who really care about the quality of their content. And so in terms of how our products differentiate there, we have a lot more tooling that allows for more curation and editorial control over the suggestions that we give, and also workflow features that allow those teams who do spend more time working on their content to actually do that within our platform. And we have less of those features that are like one-click modern article spinners. That's not something that we really want to touch. And so I think MarketMuse fits into that category as well. For a long time in this space, MarketMuse was the only one. And so they very quickly went to the enterprise route. And as a result, their pricing reflects that. It's enterprise pricing, and their tools, although comprehensive, aren't necessarily a good fit for those more medium-sized marketing teams who aren't the largest, Fortune 50 brands. And so that's how I would describe the competitive landscape and the different customers that fit into each of the buckets.
Well, that's very helpful. Okay, so when I start thinking about, I have a new world for me. I have a new year. I have, budget that I didn't have before because we've had this COVID shift, and now my sales team is coming and they're wanting me to drive more leads. And, I have, revenue generation that's now coming to me. I have demand gen. I have all these people who are now really excited about some of the things that we're doing in the marketing side and, our content optimization. So I've got unlimited budget. I can do whatever I want. Where do I spend it? You talked about the moat, but if you could think about it from that perspective instead of, reallocation.
Yeah, unlimited spend. It's everybody's dream. Everybody, revenue solves all. That was the catchphrase at my previous company. If anybody's having a bad time, figure out a way to make more revenue. I think if I had unlimited funds, I'd actually take a little bit of a different approach based on my previous experiences. Like I mentioned in that previous company, we were able to grow really fast all through SEO. We didn't necessarily have to hustle really hard for every single deal. We were really lucky because our product inherently was able to generate leads for us through that. And so we were in a situation where we did, for our team size, we felt like we had unlimited funds. And as a result, I can speak from experience when I say that we were really good at being inefficient with those funds. And it's very easy to spend on new employees, spend on new channels, move so fast that you're not measuring anything, and generally lose that discipline that's required. That's so essential for being able to learn and advance in marketing. And so if I had to go back and do it again and have those funds, I'd actually take a different approach, try to stay as lean as possible, measure carefully, and in a disciplined way, identify places where I can build that moat, SEO, reviews, customer relationships, and basically figure out how can I do that same amount of work with less, so that in every channel that I'm investing in, I know for sure that I'm getting a positive result, because it's very easy to start spending. And the problem with spending, especially on teams, is that there's so much momentum that comes with it in terms of, once you have a team, it's like you can't downsize that very easily without affecting everything, from your morale to company culture, and so you have to figure out how to not get trapped in that situation that's so easy to find yourself in with unlimited funds.
And when I hear you say that, for me, the question I think you're really focusing in on wanting to answer on a continuous basis is, how do I get more value out of B2B digital marketing? To me, that was all value concept based and value strategy based, is what you were talking about.
Absolutely. I think that in terms of where you get the most value, it's going to be when you are experimenting, but within certain constraints, and are constantly asking yourself that question: is this driving an impact for my business?
Well, Ryo, I've had a fun time. We've gotten some really good stuff, and I hope people, really can understand, the space, the industry, and the solutions that are in it. And, now after listening and watching, more so than they did before. So, but we also have a special offer for the B2B DM gang that I think we're going to provide through Topic. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for the B2B DM gang, we've got a really special offer for you. If you're interested in upping your content marketing game and scaling up your content, we have a special coupon available on the site, on this podcast site, for 3 months, where you can get 25% off. And so you can give our software a shot, see how it plays out for you, but we're confident that it'll help you increase the quality and the quantity of the content that you're producing.
And so what that means is all you have to do is go to b2bdm.com and then do a search for Ryo, which is RYO, and you'll be able to get that. Matter of fact, I'll even put a tag in there for RIO for those that might forget. So, Ryo Chiba, I had a great time with you today. How can the B2B DM gang get in touch with you? Gosh, I'm stumbling saying it.
No, it's all good. Yeah. Your audience can get in touch with me by going to usetopic.com, and all my information is there.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang. in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.